clay, on the other hand, has that interesting quality that I learned all my ceramics in Celsius, so I'm not real good in Fahrenheit, but starting, I don't know if it's 900 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever, you know, the clay actually starts to lose some of its chemically bonded water. So you guys know from what you've been doing that when the clay hardens, it's losing its the water it's mixed with. But then in ceramics, there's a certain moment where the water that's inside somehow the molecules actually leaves, and you get that one-way transformation, right, where you can't go back. Whereas with other clay, this is fire season. Not really supposed to be having fire, so we're gonna add another brick just to make sure that we're right in the middle. We got our hose there. So there's all kinds of clay bricks. You know, there's unfired clay brick. So there's lots of ways that humans made fire before they had these things, right? Interesting to see if this I like the stories of like the fire that's carried, you know, perhaps caught from volcanoes, from lightning, and then of course friction. So probably initially with stone, but pretty quickly like shaping clay, just earth, right? People made hearths to cook on. The whole art of cooking, pretty deep. And you know, as soon as you start like surrounding a fire, you start kind of thinking about how the shapes you make influence it. So what I want you to observe over the next like hour and a half, maybe just hour, is how different shapes that we surround this fire with affect its behavior. And maybe I'll ask you guys, what are some ways that we can gauge just like how a fire is acting? What are different qualities? And yeah.
How much smoke it's got?
Yeah.
How hot it is?
Sound?
Say more about the sound.
That like whoosh, sort of rushing sound, like when it's like really active.
Right.
Crackling.
What was that?
Crackling.
Yeah.
Sound is an indication of airflow, and materials heating. I mean, the crackling is airflow.
Right? So we got the crackling, we got maybe a visual sense, almost like a vibration or a resonance happening when you have a really intense mix of fuel and air. It's kind of nice that we have a leisurely fire right now.
It's funny how the air rising from a fire can affect the sound of someone like speaking to you through it.
That's really interesting.
Because it bends the air because of the different pressures. Bends the sound wave.
And I haven't worked with these concrete pavers, so I'm not sure how accurate it is. Yeah, let's talk more about the smoke. What are different qualities of the smoke?
Production of smoke.
Color.
Density.
Quantity.
Okay, yeah. So
Hydration.
color, opacity, I like all of that.
Water.
How would we say, like right now, what's going on with the quality of the smoke?
There's less of it. Because the fire's
Dry wood.
Yeah. Is there less of it, or does it have a different composition?
More transparent.
Let's talk about this for a little bit.
defines smoke.
What's that?
What defines smoke?
All right, cool. So, so why we're doing this, why we're studying this week, right? As members of those who are in the natural building community, and like we have an intuition, maybe a conviction that it's interesting and important to develop wood fire technology because it's a local resource, right? And it's a renewable resource when well managed. And just to share, I don't know, maybe this is obvious, but I just really like to think of the forests and our gardens as solar panels, much lower tech solar panels that don't need German or Chinese manufacturing, or not that the countries matter, but and that wood is essentially, like, through photosynthesis and all that, the solidification, the crystallization of solar energy. And when we're burning wood, we're basically releasing that latent solar energy, and which is really nice when you have really hot summers and then really cold winters, right? Um, and so the process. So one important thing to know about burning wood is that you don't actually burn wood. You burn the gases that are preheated and released from the wood. And so, especially in certain configurations of fire, you can even see like the flames dancing above the wood, not off of the wood. Usually it looks like it's coming out of the wood. But basically what's happening is like there's a core of heat that's creating like a chain reaction that's giving us a certain inertia, right? If we spread this fire, it would lose that core of heat, and then all the different pieces separately would have more trouble doing a good job of burning. So what's happening then is like the wood is getting heated, and it's actually getting decomposed. And the hotter the heat, the more fully the chemical compounds are being turned into simpler and simpler compounds so that they can be burnt. So another way to say that is when you see pollution, when you see things like black smoke, those are complex, I'm missing the word for organic molecules. They're complex organic molecules that are essentially escaping without getting burned. So the worst ones are like creosote and tar. In ideal combustion, complete combustion, your only two byproducts are water and carbon dioxide, because you've turned all the C, all the H, and all the O into those two products. And it's possible. It's possible for us to build stoves that that essentially just release water vapor and carbon dioxide. Sometimes I act serious, but I'm not really that serious. I just want you guys to know that.
Was it radicals that you were referring to?
Maybe. What do you mean?
Oh, you were talking about the black smoke that comes from pollution and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, but you know, a lot of the things end with enes, like not ethylene, but you know, just long words that I don't totally understand. That basically they're like kind of almost like petroleum, also like petroleum byproducts that you know, and oftentimes. So when you add, like if I add a big piece of fuel, right, and I add it on top of the fire, what's happening is it takes a while for that's cold fuel right there, and I should get some black smoke because the cold fuel is going to take some time to really heat up so that it's releasing gases. So this is neat. We're kind of starting to get like a spiral, right? If we hadn't built these walls, that fire wouldn't have that shape. It would likely look more like a campfire. So, you know, one way to gauge, or the easiest way to gauge the efficiency of fire is how clear the smoke is. If it's clear, then you're doing a good job of burning up, really using that fuel. And if it's not, not only are you polluting, but you're not fully taking advantage of the fuel that you're getting. So during this week, we'll have kind of a balance. There's some aspects of what we're going to do that you might even ask, like, is this natural building? It might be more just building, you could say. I'll try to cover, like, for example, we'll be using my brick saw to cut bricks so that we can do it with a level of precision. But, you know, you're already becoming familiar with how one would go about cutting bricks with a hammer. And the key with that is just scoring and especially breaking the corners where you want it. Alright. So we could keep corbelling, right? This technique is called corbelling. Basically cheating in. If you're really going to cheat, you might consider the notion of a cantilever, where you know you can cheat out if you have enough weight back behind. I think I'm going to cheat and speed ahead several thousand years. And a little precarious. More precarious than I would like. So what I'm using right now is called a lintel, right? Okay. Can we hydrate a little bit of that then? I'll go get. So we have some smoke right now, right? So what do you guys think of our little fireplace here?
It's cute.
Pretty cool. So as far as fireplaces go, there's a really great book called The Book of Masonry Stoves. I'll bring it on Thursday. That really gives a really good history of people building for fire. You know, one really important technology in our history was achieving ways that we were able to get chimneys, whether they were brick or eventually metal chimneys, through roofs, right? The whole, so that was a good reason why some fireplaces were right in the middle of the home where the ridge was, so that at least you were shedding away from it, you know, before you had good metal flashing. And in other cases, that fireplaces were on the outside of the home. In general, like the basic pattern for a fireplace is just a rectangular box, and a lot of times on the outside of the home. And that was like a pattern that, you know, has continued from colonial times until really, like, I feel like until about the 1950s. Most homes were built with a fireplace on the outside of the home. And my understanding of that is, one thing I'm just going to break to say is, it's interesting now that you see some smoke escaping this way and some smoke coming out this way. It's likely because this is a smaller passage, and as these bricks heat up, it's likely that more and more will go up that way. But my understanding is that, like, fireplaces and, you know, in America were built as much to heat in the wintertime as they were to have a safe place to cook in the summertime, where you actually wanted to heat, you didn't want to heat your home. And from like a masonry heater builder's perspective, it's just so crazy to see how many homes have the heaters, their fireplaces on the outside of the home. And then just another word about, you have to do more research on your own if you're interested, but you know, the basic rectangular firebox of a fireplace, the main evolution of that is towards what's called a Rumford fireplace. So a Rumford fireplace is a shallower fireplace that has more open walls, and basically it achieves in generally a higher fire because the fire is sticking to those walls, and because the walls are facing out, you just get a lot more radiant heat into the room. So those are some more interesting vocabularies. You know, the three kinds of heat transfer: radiant heat, radiation, convection, and conduction. So a fireplace is mostly radiant heat, and cool. Let's see if we can give this a little bit of a seal here. We're still not. So it looks like most of the fire is going up through here now, right? Yeah. Although there's still some escaping. Was there any perceivable change when I put this on?
Yeah. It all started going up that way, pretty much.
Let's just see.
Some coming out.
Does there happen to be one more length? I guess I could try. Oh. I don't know how long we'll leave this, but so I'm surprised we didn't hear more of a difference. But basically, what we're experimenting with.
Smoke's going up and air's coming out.
Yeah, there's still
a lot coming out.
Yeah, I'm interested. That's kind of interesting.
Maybe because you just put wet cob onto it?
It's pooping.
No, but another thing is, so one thing in fireplace design is like this opening would probably be nice if we were using an 8-inch pipe. So there's a proportionality between the size of the opening and the size of your chimney.
Starting to take off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the
Would
more.
that hole on the left, a little gap, make a difference in the brick? Down
Which-
low, third stack.
Sure. Yeah, all of these things. And this is one of the problems about fireplaces, right? Is that they can sometimes smoke under certain conditions. I think it's got to be that as this heats up, you know, we can play around with like. I'm just curious how this affects to give it less air. I guess the big thing is that we've got a lot of leaks, which is a good reason for mortar.
Do you ever design fireplaces like in a home with intake, an air intake from the outside?
Yeah.
Like, that's something I feel like should be relatively common, but you hardly ever see.
Yeah. So that's often referred to as like outside air for combustion. Yeah. Outside combustion air. So there's a lot of mixed opinions about that, and one thing is that a fireplace. I'm sorry that it's smoking forward. A fireplace consumes a tremendous amount of oxygen, of air, and so commonly, like, it creates a lot of draft in your house because, and one of the problems about a fireplace is that you get a lot of air washing up the chimney. So you're basically moving a lot more air through your building than you really need to have efficient combustion. On top of that, the air is actually cooling the fire in a lot of ways. When you get into like wood stoves where you're controlling the amount of the air, like there's a lot less air being moved. And so like modern building practice, in a lot of places it's code to have outside air for combustion. And so a lot of times that air is brought up from the crawl space, and it just needs to be administered within a certain distance from the firebox. And the idea there is that you're supplying air directly to the firebox, and you're also not like kind of depressurizing the house by taking air from the house, which would usually the house would respond by bringing air in through cracks. The thing is that like in houses with Tyvek wrap and all that, that's like outside air is almost necessary because they've created such a seal that there's not even a healthy, right? So the extreme is that there are modern houses that need air exchangers to exchange the air so many times a day. And so most of my mentors say, like, if you're working with a building official and they require outside air, you have to put in outside air, but that otherwise just the natural exchange of this less amount of air that's going into your firebox is a healthy thing in your home. Okay, so enough of this fireplace. You get the idea. I'm going to go try to move pretty quickly into talking about rocket stoves, rocket mass heaters. How many of you guys have heard about rocket stoves or rocket mass heaters? How many of you guys think you know something about it? Or what they are? Okay, so in my opinion, rocket stoves are like, in the permaculture, sustainable living movement, just like an example of just incredible marketing success. And I think the name was brilliant, and I think its DIY nature is also a huge thing. Like, someone with relatively little skill could try to do it and likely mess up, and maybe succeed. And many of those same people who went about doing it and may or may not have actually created something successful, documented it, put it on their blog, participated in Permies.com, and it just took off. It happened, right? And again, I think that there's really a lot of excitement about because there are a lot of really good principles involved, which hopefully we're going to explore now. But at the same time, it's like there's a lot of things that can go wrong with specifically the home heat version. So